the amount of feedback I was getting from people saying, what can we do? How can we help? And we tried to keep the message really simple. It was basically write to your MP. And people started to send me copies of the letters to MPs and then the reply from MPs. And there was just this really optimistic feeling that it had created such a stir that maybe something was going to happen. I never expected them to end the cull so quickly.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Payne, and this is episode 476 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, the photography podcast where we dig into the why behind the work. Today's guest is Ian Wood, a wildlife photographer and conservationist based in Dorset, England, where he and his partner are actively rewilding their own land. Ian won Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice for an urban badger image that reached a global audience at a pivotal moment in one of the UK's most contentious wildlife policy debates. He's also spent over 2 decades working with the Orangutan Foundation UK, Gorilla Doctors, and the Jane Goodall Institute, building a career around the idea that photographs can do more than document. Let's dive into my conversation with Ian Wood. All right, Ian Wood, it's great to have you on the podcast.
It's an honor, Matt. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and it's very cool to actually put a face behind the beautiful voice.
Yes, and I'm digging the Badger shirt there. That's pretty on brand for you. Yeah.
Well, I have worn it for this evening because it's one of my favorite t-shirts, and badgers. I'm sure we will talk about them. Have been quite a big part of my life recently.
Yeah. I can't wait to have that conversation. But before we go there, I would love for you to tell us who the heck Ian Wood is.
Well, I'm a full-time wildlife and conservation photographer, and I have been for about 25 years. I live in Dorset, which is in southwest England, and I'm probably best known for my work in great apes and badgers, I suppose. I use my images both for raising awareness of issues, but also for helping raise funds for various projects. And I'm really proud to be an ambassador for the Orangutan Foundation UK and Badger Trust.
Awesome. How did you get interested in orangutans and badgers?
Well, orangutans came first, and actually orangutans were the entire route into my photography. So I always liked nature, and I was having a very long walk in a forest in Sumatra, best part of 30 years ago, and saw my first orangutans, and I had a terrible film camera, and they were it was the early days of logging, and it seemed such a frustrating situation that the locals were earning so little money to get this timber out, and it all began with a naive idea of maybe we could do something positive for it.
And how would you say that's gone so far?
In terms of positivity for orangutans?
Yeah.
Well, overall, the pictures is pretty bleak because I've seen most of those forests destroyed over the last 35 years. But there's a number of very inspiring projects. Ashley Lehman, who runs the Orangutan Foundation, has a very good quote that she told me many years ago, is that we can't win the war, but we'll pick our battles and we'll really fight them properly. So there's some really inspiring projects that are not just protecting forest, but planting trees and restoring habitat. And so the long-term future for our orange friends is good. But obviously over the last 35 years, there has been an awful lot of habitat destruction.
I love that nuanced take on it because I think it's really easy for, especially nowadays, for people to go into like full on doom and gloom, black and white thinking like the world's ending. And I think it's important for us to have some perspective about what's actually happening.
Completely, because all this is fed at us so much. And if you just go down the doom and gloom propaganda, it makes people give up and do nothing. And that's the worst thing we could do.
Well said. All right. So tell us about your life in Dorset and a little bit about the rewilding project that you and your partner are building on your land.
Yeah, cool. Well, I've just got back here because I've been working out of England for the best part of the last 5 months. And now I'm always trying to spend from about mid-February through to mid-October here in Dorset in England. And my lovely partner, she's called Georgie. We are very fortunate to own a farmhouse, in quite an old farmhouse in the countryside, and it has about 9 acres of very beautiful land. This is our third grow season. So it's a reasonably new project. But one of the things that appealed about the house and land, because it took quite a while to find what we wanted, is that it's never had any chemicals used on any of the land. In its heyday, it was a livery yard for horses. So there is some woodland, but it had basically a lot of grass and not a lot of other stuff growing. So we're all about creating habitat. We've put ponds in and planted so many things and wildflower meadows. And last year in our second full grow season, it was quite incredible how it started to come alive with all the insects and everything. And we're really excited about this because the third grow season, everything goes even more. So yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing for a good few months of the year. It's just trying to make a really nice place for nature to thrive.
I love that. And as a nature photographer, I'm sure there's some inherent benefits in doing something like that in terms of attracting really cool stuff that you can photograph.
Well, that's the spin-off as well. So we have a number of outbuildings. We have swallows that come back from Africa each year. They're sometime in April they arrive. They always have two broods. So we've got two broods, usually of 5 swallows. I built a hide up there so people can watch them and photograph them. I built one half hexagonal, partly underground hide. So you go down some steps and you sit at eye level, and that's for foxes and badgers and things. So no, the photographic possibilities are really cool, but it's both. It's really getting the habitat right, and then the photography opportunities will follow.
Love that. And I'm very jealous of that. And it gives me some inspiration for something to think about for my future. But let's talk about the meat of the conversation here. So my understanding that you have won the Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award for your urban badger image. And I would love to hear you tell us the story behind that photograph and why do you think it resonated so well with a global audience?
So yeah, that image of the badger won Wildlife Photographer of the Year, People's Choice, this time last year, actually. And the story of the image, well, at that time when I took the photo, it was before I lived here. And I lived right on the edge of a very small town in another part of England. And there were lots of foxes everywhere, but it was right down the end of a no-through road and there was no cars. I was actually walking back from the pub one night, and I swear I hadn't drunk that much, and there's a badger walking towards me down the road. And I was just utterly amazed because I love badgers. I love all wildlife, but I spend a lot of time looking for badgers in areas, and it's quite hard. And you've got to be very careful how you see them so you don't spook them away. It's literally walking down the street. So for a photographer, it was incredible. A photographer and a badger lover, because no one else seemed to know they were there, because they would come up quite late at night and they were foraging on scraps of food that people had left out for foxes. And I mean, it became an obsession taking photographs of foxes and badgers. I lived there for best part of 3 years. And whenever I was there, every night I was out. I made a watering hole so they had somewhere to drink in times of drought. And that was great as a reflection pool. And I did a lot of camera trapping technology and backlit shots and take them in the pouring rain. But I mean, you're a photographer, Matt. It's all about ideas, isn't it? And originality. And so I started getting shots of it walking down the street under that lamppost by the no access sign. And then my mind has been on the badger cull a lot, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I actually put that graffiti on the wall, which is the Stop the Cull logo. And I thought if we could get a badger walking past underneath the Stop the Cull logo with the light of the street light, we could probably do something with it. I had no idea it would win Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award, obviously. But I thought we could probably do something with it in terms of getting the message out about the badger cull.
That's amazing. So you went into that entire situation with the hopes that a photograph could create some kind of movement or stir people in a way that would inspire them to take action on something that you felt very strongly about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing with the badger cull in England is it's been going on for so long. A lot of people, a lot of people that even like wildlife thought it was over. They couldn't really believe, it had all gone out the media. Because how do you keep a message going like that? And by winning that award, I mean, you got the full backing of the Natural History Museum's PR department behind you. And I think we did 120 TV and radio interviews and several hundred newspapers and magazine interviews. And I would always try and get them to talk about the badger cull. Some people wouldn't let me. They'd let me in the interview. And then when you'd see the interview, it'd be at the end of the lunchtime news and it would just be Ian Woods won a picture with a badger. But, it's that happy news item. But a lot did cover it, and it really got it back into the public agenda. It created quite a stir, I think. And then I put a lot of information on my website, and we had a real campaign to get people to write to members of parliament. Because if you get enough people to write to a member of parliament, it gets fed back to central government, and they think that people care. And you actually don't need that many people to write to each MP. And I became an ambassador for Badger Trust. So I've been linking up with them. And it was just quite incredible that from one photo, what a stir it caused and how much media attention we got from it. It certainly brought the badger cull right back onto the public agenda in quite a spectacular way.
Well, for people living in the UK, they probably have some knowledge about what you're talking about. But for us over here in the States, I have maybe a slight inkling in terms of the badger cull. So maybe you could tell us about what the badger cull is about, why was it created, and why is it a controversial subject?
Yeah, blimey, where to start? It's such a complicated subject. So the badger cull was actually introduced by the previous government. So at the moment we have a Labour government, which had been in power for about a year. The previous Conservative government brought in the badger cull way over 10 years, or nearly 15 years ago. And the result has been that 250,000 badgers have been killed at a cost to the British taxpayer of over 60 million. And in some areas of England, they've literally been forced to the brink of extinction. Now, the reason for the cull, as stated by the Conservative government, was to try and get a grip on bovine TB. They blamed the badgers for the spread of it. Now, all the science says that this is now incorrect. When Labour came to power about a year ago, it was in their manifesto to end the badger cull. And the incredible news is that they finally followed through on that, and they have ended nearly all culling in England at the end of January this year, 2026. They've kept one licence in Cumbria that we're not giving up on that, because the reason that they're keeping the licence in Cumbria is that they say they need to gather more data. Well, they've had 15 years to gather data. And the really disgraceful thing about this is that nearly every badger that's been slaughtered, they didn't even test them to see whether they had bovine TB in the first place.
Oh my goodness. Wow. What was the methodology for them to do the cull? Like, was it through poisoning or like literally just shooting them? Like, how are they pulling this off?
Literally by shooting them. And it's an awful lot of farms that got the license to shoot them. So they were paid per badger. Now, I don't know in your wildlife photography, Matt, whether you ever use any of these high-powered night vision scopes. Well, I borrowed one for like a couple of weeks to see what they were using. And I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it was shocking. I could see a rabbit 2.5 kilometers away. And they claim that they were, and I use the word only disgracefully, really, it's a government word. They claimed that they were only going to kill 70% of badgers in each area, but they were paid per dead badger. I spoke to someone who worked on the cull, and they were blasting every single animal they found.
Well, I can imagine that most people who have a fondness for wildlife are going to be a little bit upset when they hear about this. Here in the United States, we have similar things happening. Wild horses, which that's a whole other controversial subject, but like wild horses are supposed to be managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and typically they're roaming on public lands that are used for cattle grazing. And what ends up happening is that the wild horses are competing for the cattle for territory and food. And because of the nature of wild horses, they cause some environmental impacts on the lands that they occupy. And so the brilliant idea is that we just need to kill a bunch of wild horses, which, as you could probably imagine in the United States, like the wild horse is like this emblematic, iconic thing. And so it stirs a lot of people when they hear about that particular problem as well. So I can imagine in the United Kingdom, though, with the badgers, it's a similar issue once people gain a full understanding of exactly how it's being executed. It leads me to my next question. Like, what were the impacts of the cull in terms of the badgers themselves and like any other downstream ecological impacts that you might know about?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, in several, the curious thing about it, they did it in some parts of England and they didn't do it at all in other parts. But in parts where they had the badger cull, they've literally taken them to the brink of extinction. You just hardly see badgers anymore. The real impact is that it's not made any difference on bovine TB. And this is also colossal problem for cattle. Loads of people, loads of farmers have lost dairy cattle. And as part of Britain, we have Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. And the badger cull is very much an English thing. And when you look at the science of it, Wales is the best example because Wales doesn't kill badgers at all and has reduced its rate of bovine TB far less than England, even after this mass slaughter. And they've achieved it by basically better farm hygiene, a much better testing of TB. It's slightly more expensive test than the one they do in England, and better control on cattle movement. And that's what all the data says. But it's actually quite a divisive issue because the previous government lied to the farmers. They said that this is what was needed. And if you're a farmer who's having your cattle shot and losing not only animals that you like, but your livelihood, and the government is telling you that it's the badger, you can't blame them for believing that. So it's actually been quite a divisive issue. I never expected, when I popped my head above the water on this issue and became quite well known for it, I presumed most people like badgers, but it's very divisive. I mean, I've been on the personal end of quite a lot of abuse, actually, of, like, what does a photographer know about this? Whether you ever saw Brian May from Queen, he made a film about it. And Brian May has a thing called the Save Me Trust, and quite incredible what he does for animals. And that man has probably looked into the badger more than most people I know. They made this beautiful film about it, and he gets so much abuse. Keep playing music. What do you know about conservation? So it's actually been a very divisive issue.
Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of different issues here in the States, like around wolves and stuff like that. It's unfortunate because I feel like a lot of, like you said, it's driven by, it's sad to say, but like politicians who are trying to earn brownie points with their constituents. And like you said, they're going to tell them anything they can in order to gain favor, get their vote, feel like they're making some movement towards solving a problem that they have. And I just wish people put a little bit more effort into doing a little bit of homework in terms of maybe I shouldn't just trust everything people say.
Absolutely, yeah. And the whole politics, this thing is crazy, isn't it? It's all based on such short-termism. So let's just hope
Right.
something starts to shift on that at some point.
Yeah. So obviously, winning that award gave you a ton of media exposure, like you mentioned. I'm curious, like I've never experienced that. Like what did it feel like to suddenly have a platform where you could talk about conservation issues in real time?
It was amazing because the badger issue was personally making me really unhappy. It's like I just spend so many time with those animals and seeing them being destroyed like that. And I was, starting to wonder whether there was any chance of it ever ending. So suddenly having a platform like that, you get about a week's notice from Wildlife Photographer of the Year when you've won it. So I had a week to prepare, and as I said, their PR department of the Natural History Museum are just incredible. They were so supportive, but it was incredible. It was a whirlwind. I was actually coming back from South America when the news broke, and I did like one TV interview in the hotel checkout, and I got to check in at the airport and did another one, and then I landed in Buenos Aires and did another one, and landed in Madrid and did two more, and got back here, and there was just a week of it. It was crazy, but it was quite exhilarating because the amount of feedback I was getting from people saying, what can we do? How can we help? And we tried to keep the message really simple. It was basically write to your MP. And people started to send me copies of the letters to MPs and then the reply from MPs. And there was just this really optimistic feeling that it had created such a stir that maybe something was going to happen. I never expected them to end the cull so quickly. And I'm certainly not saying that this photo did that on its own in any way at all. This has been years of hard work of campaigning by people like Protect the Wild, Chris Packham, Badger Trust, just so many organisations. I think this photo just gave it a boost at the time that it needed it because it had gone off the public agenda.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so you've also won the British Wildlife Photography Awards documentary series for your work on the badger cull. What did creating a narrative series allow you to do or allow you to say that a single image couldn't?
Oh, well, lots, because the brief for that is 6 photos. So every photo's got to stand out on its own, and then together they've got to tell a story. So it took a long time to take the photos because it's like, what, 6 ideas? You need 6 ideas, and it's quite hard hitting some of them. There's kind of a terrible shot of a dead badger, and then there's a shot of what you see through the scope of the badger at night in the rifled kind of hairs. And then my partner Georgie, she dressed in a beautiful badger costume, and we went up to London to protest outside the government offices. So that was a day. It was a lot of work, but it was exciting because it was really trying to think of the idea of how the 6 photos would work together. I'll tell you one of the hardest photos to get. I wanted to have a photo of cows in it because this issue is so much about how many cattle have needlessly been killed. And that was one of the hardest images because how do you take an interesting picture of cows? And that was just luck. So I'd been in Indonesia and I got back, and it never snows here anymore, Matt. It used to snow, but with global warming, it just never snowed. And I got back and I had about an hour of snow. And so I went up and found some cows and did some slow motion shots of the snow falling at them because I was struggling. I'd looked at all sorts of how I could take nice pictures of cows and was struggling. I'd done super wide angle, so that was kind of lucky. Yeah?
That's amazing. So, more broadly, what responsibility do you feel wildlife photographers have when their work intersects with policy and public opinion?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the first thing is being as well briefed on a subject as you possibly can. And then if you don't know the answer, I think you just say, I don't know, because you can't be expected to know every bit of it. But if you suddenly become a bit of a figurehead for an issue, yeah, and then also, be prepared to get other people to help you. So with all the media around the British Wildlife Photography Awards documentary prize, the CEO of the Badger Trust is going to help me a bit. So if we do a television interview and they have someone from, say, the farming community who's been told that badgers are being killed, he'll come and do it with me. I'm a photographer. I know something about it, but I'm not going to know anywhere near as much as him. So yeah, being well briefed and then getting a lot of help on the bits that you don't know, because you don't want to put any false messages out.
I was thinking too, it occurs to me that it would be really advantageous, challenging to learn as much as you can about the opposition's viewpoint in terms of understanding why people feel strongly about this issue in the opposite way that you feel, and trying to really articulate in an empathetic way about how you understand those challenges while also addressing how you can maybe bridge the gap.
Yes, as well said, Matt, because that bit is absolutely vital. If you try and argue with people, all you're going to do is make it more diversive. So trying to bridge that gap and get people to talk to each other and understanding the other side, because I totally see. I live in a farming community, and I've had, there's a friend around here called John who has cattle, and he's told me, he said, well, the badgers are killing them all. Yeah, I completely understand it through his eyes. So no, yeah, that is, yeah, very, very good point.
All right. On the other side of the conservation spectrum, I know that you've done some work with the Orangutan Foundation of the UK, and you've raised significant funds over 2 decades. How did that relationship start?
So if we go back to how I told you I got into photography as seeing these orangutans in Sumatra many years ago, I was young and naive, Matt, and I had this idea that maybe if I returned and got some better pictures, we could pay people not to cut the trees down. At that time, 35 years ago, 4 people were paid about $1 for a week's work to get one tree out. And it was before lots of palm oil was being planted. It was just a crazy, naive idea that we'll get some better pictures and maybe we could take some people to see them and pay the people not to cut the trees down. Like, life is not simple like that and would never work. But that was the idea. I learned Bahasa Indonesian because it's quite an easy language to learn and thought that would be useful. And then I went back out there and got some better pictures. But really it was I realized quite soon that I needed to partner with an NGO in some kind of way. The Orangutan Foundation UK were one of the people that I approached, and I liked a few things about them. But one of the things that I really liked is they're a very, very small NGO, and nearly all of the funds that they raise go to Indonesia to protect habitat. And it's also a very people-based conservation NGO. It's about empowering the local people to protect what they love.
That's awesome. As you were talking, I had a couple of questions pop into my head. One, how did you get so passionate about wanting to have your photos make a difference? I mean, I know a lot of people are very content just capturing natural beauty and letting that do its thing, but You clearly have something under your skin that's driving you to take action beyond what most people try to do.
Yeah, well, I think because this came before the photography. The photography was a tool to do this, and I guess it was kind of a thing that when you feel really strongly about an issue, and it's like I love forests. I find it heartbreaking when habitat like that is destroyed. But when you see something and you find it, you feel really, really strong. Like doing nothing just drives me mad. Even if you do something and fail, I would prefer to go down that option. And really, the path that this led to, everything's just unfolded in front of me. It's never been it's come from a passion of trying to protect habitat. And the whole 25 years from there seems to have just like all followed in some kind of way. It's difficult to describe.
My second question was around how do you make ends meet in terms of funding these issues and funding your time and trying to make a difference with your photography? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I was very lucky in the early days of doing it, is that I did have another job, although I don't think you could really call it a job. I was half of a comedy duo called The Invisible Men, and we were in huge demand worldwide, and we were paid a lot of money to do our show, and we toured all over the world. So I would, for instance, do a 6-city tour of Indonesia, and we'd be paid a crazy amount of work for doing very little, and then I'd end up in Indonesia with a huge chunk of money, and it would fund a whole load of wildlife photography. So for a while there was a big overlap, and I had another source of money. This has been my only income now for a good probably 16, 17 years. And yeah, from a variety of sources, something always seems to pop up. There's always basically a spin-off from following your passion, I think. So I do workshops, and I have quite a few photos with an agency, and I sell quite a few images. But then something happens, like with the badger thing. Samson asked me to do an advert. One of their new phones could work in low light, photographing badgers, and obviously that's commercial work. And then I charge for that at proper rates. I think it really comes back to that thing from following your passion and not trying to make money out of it. You kind of hope that will something will happen. I get a lot of emails now from people who are just getting going in it, and that's a regular question: is what salary can I expect? How can I make a living out of this? And that's usually my reply is follow your passion and figure another way of earning money in the short term and see where it goes. Because I mean, as you know, it's not an easy game to make a living out of.
For sure. And that advice is so practical and so full of wisdom, because I feel like if you just focus on the passion and focus on the things that you're drawn to naturally and just really lean heavily into it and don't even care about the monetization piece, like that's going to keep growing and growing and growing. It might take a long time. It might take 15, 20 years, like you said. But eventually, I do think that effort will shine through and things will start happening in your life that'll reward you for that passion and that effort, because people are going to know, oh, that Ian guy, he's the badger guy. Like now I have this idea. And it's like, I think it just starts accumulating slowly, like a snowball rolling down a very not super steep hill, but it eventually collects enough to where it starts to feel like it's important.
Exactly. And also, you're going to come across very genuine like that. Imagine if you approached an NGO and it really was about how much money you could earn about a project. Well, you're going to look a lot better if they genuinely care about it. So when I first approached the Orangutan Foundation, that they just knew this guy Ian Wood had approached them. I wasn't a photographer at the time, remember? I was a photographer, but a dreadful one. I was just trying to say, I want to help in some kind of way. And I went out to see their projects and everything. I used to do quite a bit of writing as well. So I did have some income from that, and then supplying words and photo packages a bit. But yeah, totally. But it comes back to the passion, doesn't it? And the analogy of a snowball down a very gradual slope is absolutely spot on, because that's what it's been like. Yeah. And just having faith in the universe that it will look after you.
Yeah. And using that same analogy, I'm sure your path is similar to mine in terms of like, you feel like the snowball is getting more and more snow, and then it hits a rock and it gets smaller, and you got to keep pushing it down the hill again.
Yeah, well, often in life, I think there's this point, not just in photography, but in lots of things, where you put a lot of time into something, and there's often a bit where you think, maybe this isn't going to happen and I might give up. And if you push through that bit it always seems to happen. But there's often this slight rock or obstacle, isn't there, where you just need that little bit. It's the final challenge to push through it. So persistency, persistency and passion.
I love that. The two P's. All right. Well, I also know that you donate some of your imagery and video freely to the foundation. I'm curious, why is it important to you to donate your work that way, and how do you balance that with running your sustainable career?
Well, with the Orangutan Foundation, I view my mission to make money for them, not cost them money. So I give all of my imagery whenever I'm out there. I would never charge them for anything. And obviously, photos and videos are so important in them getting their message across. And now with social media, it consumes so much imagery. So my mission for them has always been to raise money. So I run these photography groups out there where I take a small group of wildlife photographers each year, and they make a generous donation to the project. So, but again, there's lots of spin-offs from that. So it allows me to, I've been photographing orangutans for good 25 years now. So you imagine how much it would have cost me to spend 25 years of 2 months a year in Borneo building up my portfolio. It would have cost me a fortune. So that hasn't cost me anything because obviously my expenses are all covered. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah, that's lovely, and I think that's such a smart way to approach it in terms of like understanding what the win-win is in a partnership, in terms of like, I'm gonna get this amazing experience, I'm gonna get some awesome photos, and I'm gonna let you guys use them for however you need to use them in order to further your cause, which then also enables me to continue to be able to enjoy photographing this thing I love to photograph.
Yeah. And the other spin-off is, I've met so many incredible people. So by running, I was never intending to run photography trips to other countries, but by starting the orangutan ones, I've done them for so long. There's hundreds and hundreds of people that have come on them, and obviously some people you click with, and then people have said, "God, you like the Galapagos too? Can you take me to the Galapagos?" So I feel honoured that people want to travel with me and beautiful places and photograph wildlife. So, yeah, that's very special.
One thing I was really curious to ask you about is how you tie in the conservation piece with how you structure and approach print sales. So I know that your print sales, you do some limited edition printing that directly funds habitat protection. How do you communicate to art buyers and collectors that they're not just buying art, but they're also contributing to something tangible and meaningful that you're passionate about?
Well, when I launched the Great Ape range, that was reasonably easy because some very, very prominent people signed the first edition prints. So Sir David Attenborough signed the first edition print of a mountain gorilla, Jane Goodall, a chimpanzee, and Ashley Lehman, a an orangutan. And then we auctioned them off, and it gained a huge amount of publicity. So much media covered it, and we gave every penny of those away. So in the original launch of it, it was very easy to do that because it was clearly obvious what we were doing. And then when I just sell them devalued by my signature, that we gave we give 25% to the NGOs. I mean, that's reasonably obvious. If people go to my website and they're looking for a print, I think it's reasonably obvious that you only have to have a little look into the fact that that's what we're doing. So it's and again, so I earn money out of the prints, but then they also raise a little bit of money. But the main way they seem to work is when you have an exhibition. So at some point, we are going to have another exhibition of them, but possibly in the States, Match. We shall see.
Very cool. I was curious, have you heard feedback from print buyers that connection to conservation was something that they had considered in terms of being a meaningful reason to buy your work as opposed to someone else's?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots. I think that's been a very regular thing with those images. Yeah, yeah. But I also do. I have a range of they're seascape prints, which they don't give any money to anything. They're purely a way of putting a range together and making an income. So they're something like that is very separate. And then I'm the badger, the urban badger that won the Wildlife Photographer of the Year People's Choice Award is available as a limited edition print. But I'm working on a range of badgers and foxes that are going to go into a collection, and then again we'll make a donation to Badger Trust and a fox NGO from them.
And then similarly, I know that you've done some work with gorilla doctors and the Jane Goodall Institute. What have great apes taught you about connection and responsibility?
Another very good question. Well, I mean, there's something about spending time with great apes. They are our closest relatives, aren't they? They're, the level of DNA we share with them is very, very high. So there's something about spending time with great apes that just, I just find it so, so special. But they're also such a figurehead because by default, if you can conserve enough forest so that orangutans can survive and mountain gorillas and chimpanzees, you protect this enormous range of biodiversity. So, in a way, so many people get this connection from great apes. And I think if we didn't have them in those forests would all be gone. And if you look at mountain gorillas, that's such a positive story. There's more mountain gorillas than there's ever been now. Their numbers still go up because they've got a grip on poaching. And, totally, totally positive.
Hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, I haven't had the experience yet. It's definitely something that I want to do someday. And every single person I've ever talked to who's had the opportunity to photograph mountain gorillas, they said it was transformative.
Absolutely. And you get most mountain gorilla encounters are an hour long. You can pay a little bit more and they call it a habituation experience. It's not a true habituation experience because I've been out with habituation teams. And if you go out with a habituation team very early on, you're just going to get a glimpse of them. So it's a group that hasn't been open to the public yet. But when you find them, you get to spend 4 hours with them. But most mountain gorilla encounters are an hour long. So you spend this time walking in the forest and then you find them and you've got an hour and they whisper in your ear when you've had 30 minutes and you think, what? I've only just arrived. And then they tell you you've got 5 minutes left. And it's strange because it's the quickest hour and the slowest hour of your life because it just goes like that. But then it's got so much meaning to it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing. So I'm curious. So for other photographers listening who want their work to genuinely make a difference, what is the first step? Finding a cause, building relationships, or building an audience, or something else?
Well, maybe a bit of everything because these days, like, building an audience I'm a bit of a social media Luddite, but, I've been good. I didn't used to even respond when people made a comment but I've been a lot more into it over the last couple of years because it's really made me realize, like for a cause, it's quite incredible how you can motivate people and, like people of similar, like-minded people coming together. It's a very, very powerful tool. So I guess that is kind of important. But I think it all comes back to this passion thing again. I think that at that stage, find something you care about. And it doesn't have to be a great ape. It could be something just very local and small to you. Find something you care about and specialize in it and make it your own and trust that will lead to the path of, yeah.
I was just saying, like, don't focus on the monetization or the popularization of your images because I think oftentimes I've seen people who get frustrated and discouraged because they're not making money in photography or they don't have 1 billion followers on Instagram or whatever. And it's like, okay, but remember, you're not doing it for that stuff. You're doing it because you have this passion for this other stuff. And these other things are just shiny objects that you need to ignore for now, right?
Yeah, completely. And then, that's where if people starting out, if you can just find a way of earning money from somewhere else so that you haven't got that pressure on the photography side, it gives you a lot of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we've talked so much about this, and I was hoping you had a little bit more because it's really infectious. I mean, after years of conservation storytelling, what keeps you hopeful right now?
So many things keep me hopeful, Matt. The orangutan project in Borneo, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of trees that have been planted out there. And when you plant a little sapling in Borneo, I go back there 2 years later and it's this high. And I go back there 5 years later and it's a mini forest. And we've released so many orangutans back into the wild and they're all having babies and there's a sustainable population and there's so many jobs created from it. I just come back utterly inspired, thinking everything's fine in the world. I spent quite a bit of time in the Galapagos Islands. That gives me exactly the same feeling. They had the foresight to protect those islands from the 1950s and the way that humans and nature can live in harmony is utterly inspiring. But then also, you don't have to travel to the other side of the world. Here, where I am, going out in spring and summer and seeing far, far more butterflies than there were last year because we've planted, various flowers and stuff. It just lifts my spirit and gives me hope. So I spent quite a bit of time with Jane Goodall over the years, and her message of hope was really, really positive. It was really on that thing that, never give up hope. One person can achieve so much, and that so much might just be growing more habitat in your garden and watching more insects come.
Yeah, and I've been glomming more and more onto this idea of collectivism and, obviously one person can make a little bit of a difference, but if you can get your ideas out there and find other people who share those same ideas and then build a movement based on your collective passion for something and then start to partner with each other and find a way to move something forward that's not just one person, but it's a group of people, I think that can be incredibly impactful and also very powerful.
Yeah, completely. And we touched briefly on the subject of politics. We elect all of these leaders, and so if we gather together a network and tell them what we actually want, like most people I know, we all want pretty similar things. We want a peaceful life. We want to have enough food on the table, somewhere to live, and most people totally care about nature. And if we network together, that will really get through, I think, and hopefully that will become much more of an agenda of of them realizing, well, this is actually what people want, and will be vote winning as well.
I love it. All right, so Ian, I have one final question for you. Who do you recommend for the podcast? Who is someone that we need to learn more about?
I don't know have you ever had Ross Hodinott, an English photographer, on?
No, I have not. Go on.
Ross Hodinott, I'd recommend him. He's based slightly further west in England, and he specializes in macro and landscapes, but his macro work you'll love it. It's not, you see a lot of macro stuff where it's super detailed and really focused on that. His is much more about showing it in its habitat and going into kind of quite artistic work. It's very, very, very beautiful, and a very, very nice man.
That sounds amazing. How can people learn more about what you're doing and all the cool projects that you're working on?
Well, my Instagram is Ian Woodywood.
Love it. Well, Ian, this has been so much fun. I loved hearing your perspective, and your positivity about these conservation stories is really infectious. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much too, Matt. It's been so nice to meet you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much to Ian for that conversation. Genuinely, one of those episodes that reminds you why this show exists. If you got value from this episode, I'd ask you to consider giving that value back by supporting the show on Patreon. That's the model here. No corporate overlords, no sponsors dictating the conversation, just listeners who believe that long-form, substantive conversations about photography are worth keeping alive. Over 240 bonus episodes, early access, and an ad-free experience. All of it funded by people who listen and decide it's worth something. If you've been meaning to join, today is a good day to do it. The link is in the show notes. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.